Hey everyone, Megan here, and today we're talking all about self-sabotage, what it is, and how you may be sabotaging yourself right now. Before we can dig into all of the different ways you might be self-sabotaging, let's get on the same page first about what self-sabotage actually is. According to Psychology Today, behavior is said to be self-sabotaging when it creates problems in daily life and interferes with long-standing goals. So self-sabotaging is when you do things that directly prevent your ability to even achieve your goals. So a really quick example is maybe you set out the goal to be healthier, but then you went and got fast food for lunch. Or maybe you really wanted to do a major project, but then you decided that you didn't really want to do it and you weren't motivated and you sat on the couch on your phone all day instead. Sabotage looks a lot of different ways, and we're going to dig into that next. But that's kind of at a high level, some different ways self-sabotage can show up in your life. It's really these little things, these little action steps that you take that actually prevent you from not only achieving your goals, but even making progress towards them. And as you can imagine, we don't want to be self-sabotaging, right? Like we set these goals because we want to achieve them. We want to see them become reality in our lives. Otherwise, why would we have set them? But even though we set these goals because we want to actually achieve them, there are still thoughts and feelings that are happening beneath the surface that are affecting our behaviors and how they show up and how we act in real life. Now, let me ask you a question. Don't you want to stop self-sabotaging? Don't you want to see your goals be a reality? I'm sure your answer is yes, or you wouldn't even be here. So let's talk a little bit about how and why we self-sabotage so that you can start to understand a little bit more what is happening beneath the surface that's causing you to self-sabotage. There are, of course, a lot of different reasons why someone might sabotage themselves, and it may vary a little bit from person to person. But what I'm about to share with you is stuff that I have experienced not only myself through my personal development journey, but also through work with my clients and students. So these are some of the most common reasons why I've seen people self-sabotage. One reason why you may be self-sabotaging is because you're afraid. Afraid of what other people will think, what other people will say, what other people will do, afraid of failing, afraid of being successful. There are so many things that cause us fear, and this is where your fear might look different from someone else's. But I bet that if you even take a minute to just analyze what's happening beneath the surface of why you're self-sabotaging, it might be because you're afraid of something, and it usually has to do with other people more than it even does ourselves. And often when we're feeling afraid, we will self-sabotage because if we're so afraid of the negative consequences of taking these actions, oftentimes we will do whatever we can to avoid taking the action in the first place to protect ourselves from that fear actually happening and having the worst case scenario actually come to fruition. So being afraid is a very real reason for why self-sabotage happens. Another reason you may be self-sabotaging is because it's uncomfortable in the short term in order to gain that long-term goal that you're seeking. So oftentimes that shows up in our lives by just avoiding it altogether or procrastinating or putting it off because sometimes that short-term discomfort doesn't feel good and we have a hard time pushing through that because of the long-term benefit. So sometimes we will actually choose the opposite and sabotage ourselves because we want the short-term enjoyment. So again, health can be a great example here. If you know that maybe for your body, you feel better when you don't eat dairy, for example, and that's a long-term gain. Like there's a long-term gain for that, but not eating dairy in the short term might feel really disappointing or uncomfortable or bring up some negative emotions or feelings. And so you may decide to just eat dairy to feel good in the short term, but then in the long run, you feel bad. So it can look a lot of different ways and come up in a lot of different scenarios. But oftentimes when that feeling of avoiding that short-term discomfort pops up, it usually shows up through just avoiding procrastination or straight up just doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do or what you set out to do. So that is another reason why you may be self-sabotaging. And one of the last big reasons why I see people self-sabotage is because their beliefs don't support their dream becoming a reality. So regardless of what your dream or your goal is, if your beliefs don't align with it, it's really, really hard to move forward and you will find yourself self-sabotaging at every single step of the way. So for example, if you have set a goal to quit your full-time job and be a full-time entrepreneur, but you don't believe that you will be a good entrepreneur, you don't believe you'll ever be able to leave your job, you don't believe you'll be successful or make money, then it's going to be really hard for you to actually take the steps to achieve your goals because you don't believe it's possible. So you're going to self-sabotage yourself every single step of the way because you want to validate your beliefs. Like your brain wants to prove yourself and your beliefs correctly. So if you believe it's going to be hard or you can't do it, your brain will just try to reinforce that idea. And you will just start to self-sabotage. You'll start trying to be a perfectionist. You'll stop really showing up because you're afraid. Again, they're all kind of interconnected, but really this one, the root of it is that your beliefs don't support your dream even becoming a reality. So you self-sabotage because you just don't think it's really possible. And if you don't think it's possible, isn't it more comfortable to just not even try at all? Because who wants to fail, right? So this is kind of what's happening beneath the surface. These may not be conscious thoughts that you're having. So, you may not actually think this all the way through in your head before you self-sabotage, but this is the inner work, the inner conversation that your brain is having while you're self-sabotaging. And of course, there may be other reasons why you're self-sabotaging. Everyone's a little bit different, but those are kind of the big three reasons that I've seen show up a lot in my life and in my clients' lives. Okay, so we talked about what self-sabotage is and why you might be self-sabotaging, some of those inner thoughts and feelings that are driving the behavior of self-sabotage. Now let's talk about 3 different ways you might be self-sabotaging right now to kind of help you even see this more clearly. Again, self-sabotage will show up in a lot of different ways for different people. These are just the big 3 that I've seen a lot in my work. The first way is through procrastination. Procrastination is a huge and easy way to self-sabotage because you can often mask procrastination through something that you can convince yourself is productive, like planning or learning or researching. Oftentimes we feel like those things are productive, but truly we are overdoing it and we are just procrastinating and avoiding taking the action that's actually going to put us in what we perceive to be a vulnerable situation. So we might be procrastinating through something like planning, which I call procrastiplanning, or through learning or organizing or systemizing everything or mapping out a really detailed project plan. Or you might be procrastinating through doing small things instead of the big things. So when you're looking at your to-do list, you might be just tackling all those little tiny things that are easy to mark off and fill your whole day with them and never make time for the bigger tasks that, again, put you in what feels like a vulnerable spot. Or I've even seen procrastination show up through an extreme loss of energy, loss of motivation, or even sometimes sickness. So whenever I have a big project, that's a big one for me. I will suddenly feel just exhausted for no actual reason. I've gotten sleep, I've eaten well, but I will feel suddenly too tired to work. And that is a version of procrastination. Another way self-sabotage can show up in your life is that negative self-talk and those negative beliefs. So anytime you are your own worst critic in your head or verbally, you're saying bad things about yourself, you're reinforcing these negative beliefs, you're reinforcing your doubt. You don't think you have enough time. You don't think you know enough. You know everything's going to be so hard. All of these negative thoughts really reinforce those negative beliefs. And it just makes it so dang hard to show up and do anything when this is how you're talking to yourself. So if you are often your own worst critic, there's a lot of negative self-talk, that is a direct form of self-sabotage. And it's really harmful in a lot of ways. And the third way self-sabotage might be showing up in your life is through perfectionism or waiting until you feel like something is ready, or maybe you feel like you're ready. So those are all really perfectionism, but I've worked with people before who think they're not a perfectionist, but then they say that they can't do something until they know more. And it's putting the perfectionism on themselves instead of the work. So it really is still a form of perfectionism. So don't wait for things to be perfect or wait for you to be perfect before you take action. Waiting and waiting to be perfect or have your work be perfect is absolutely self-sabotage. You're going to delay your progress. You're going to prevent yourself from taking action in a lot of instances. And again, it kind of reinforces that negative self-talk that you're not good enough or your work isn't good enough as it is right now. So those are the 3 big ways that I've seen self-sabotage show up in a lot of people's lives. And I hope that it was really interesting for you to hear that and maybe identify some things that are self-sabotaging that you maybe didn't realize you were even doing. So now that you know what self-sabotaging means and how you might be sabotaging your own desires and goals and dreams from actually happening, it's really important to take this one step further. And if you want to see really significant change and transformation in your life, and you want to start enjoying your life more, seeing your dreams become a reality, then I want you to keep listening because I am hosting a free webinar just for you. In this free webinar, you'll learn the 5 mistakes that you're making every time you set goals and how to avoid them, the one thing you need to do every single day in order to design a life you love, how to stop feeling flaky and finally start following through on your plans, and how to get off the burnout hamster wheel and start feeling more energized and excited than ever before. And so much more. You can go to meganminns.com/training or click the link beneath this to go register for the free webinar right now. If you thought this was helpful, it would mean so much to me if you would share it on Instagram stories and tag me, share it with any friends you think would enjoy it, and subscribe as well. I'll see you next time.